Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks so much for coming to our panel today. I'm David Sneed, and I'm director of the Secure Hosting Alliance. The Secure Hosting Alliance is a global initiative that is focused on improving safety and accountability and trust in the hosting industry. And we have a great panel for you today. This is actually going to be a typical panel presentation where we're going to have folks receive questions and provide answers as opposed to providing presentations. So on the dais here, we have Jacqueline van der Werken from LeaseWeb, Benny Vasquez from Alma Linux, Ana Neves, and she's head of the Internet Governance Office in Portugal. We have my colleague, Christian Dawson, who is going to be our online moderator. Online, we have Vivek Goyal of L.R, Lawrence Orale Roberts from Microboss, Irina Daniela from the .ru CCTLD, and Yulia Kalpekny from the Internet and Jurisdiction Policy Network. So we have quite a number of people here. What I would like to do, though, is if folks have questions, please ask your questions during the presentation today, as opposed to saving them for the end. Though if you would like to make statements about what folks are saying that are not questions, if you could just save those to the end so that we don't interrupt the flow here. So what I'd like to do is start off with some warm-up questions. So if people would raise their hands in answer to these questions, who here has heard of the term infrastructure provider in the context of internet governance? Okay. So raise your hand if your employer or you're involved in relying on a third party for web hosting or DNS providing. Okay. And have you ever worked on or reviewed policies relating to harmful content? All right, that gives me an idea of where people are and where their expertise lies. What I'd like to do to start off with is have the panelists talk about where they are or where their orientation is in the internet infrastructure. And I'd like to start off with Jacqueline to talk about hosting.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I'm Jacqueline, I'm the General Counsel for LeaseWeb globally. We are a Dutch sovereign undertaking. We have our business all over the world, and our leadership and owners are from the Netherlands, technology-based. So it means infrastructure as a service, so that's the lowest layer in the stack. And I also am here not only representing LeaseWeb, but also the Dutch cloud community with all our members that are doing the same. And also in Brussels, it's CISP, it's cloud infrastructure providers in Europe. There we have 34 members, and we all like to share with you our ethical approach and our private-public cooperation approach to combat abuse, and also share with you what our problems are in explaining what is the proper approach for legislation. So also David asked me what actually happens when a user wants to see a website and how does it relate to the lowest layer in the stack. So that's because of the experience that if you go to a website and you type in the name, just any consumer or any user on the internet could do that, and then you see, obviously, the name of the website. So, but the name, through the DNS machine, of course, the domain name server or system will be converted in the IP address. And the IP address is the key to everything, because typically the hosting providers, the true IaaS providers, are the owners and the registered parties in ICANN, RIP, and also in, of course, in ARIN of the internet IP address. And the ownership thereof gives a lot of responsibilities and a lot of accountability. However, it's not always possible for the IaaS provider to execute on it. It's the gatekeeper and the gate, sort of the gateway to anti-abuse measures. But on the other side, there is no management on content, and there is no awareness on any content. It is just the only step in the chain of many and many commercial parties in between before the website is demonstrated to the user. Maybe a CDN network for caching or other resellers, and there's so many in between chain dependency really that it's very beneficial to us to be here, but also to speak to you, but also to regulators, to explain how technically it's working and how regulation or private-public cooperation can be efficient and effective, because most of the times it's really not. And so thanks. Maybe that helps.
Yeah, great. Benny.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Benny Vasquez. I am here representing Alma Linux. As David said, primarily my time in this space is around software, whether it's commercial or open source. And I have spent a lot of time building communities in those spaces. Those two things give me kind of a unique view for what the interactions between IGF and the infrastructure space in general.
Great. Thanks. Ana?
I'm Ana Neves. I'm from Portugal, and I'm from the government as a stakeholder. And I'll be here not to only talk about regulation, but about other ways that governments could find as useful to better serve, the infrastructure providers and the holders of the cloud, and how to better serve the citizens. Thank you.
Great, thanks. So I'd like to go to the folks online. So Vivek, would you just talk a little bit about what your position is in the internet?
Sure. Thank you, David. Glad to be here. My name is Vivek Goyal. I'm talking to you from Mumbai, India. I am the co-founder of L.R, which is an online brand protection company. And on a daily basis, we work with businesses and brands across the world and help them fight abuse. So when we are on a daily basis, we identify abuse which harms not only brands, but actually general public. And we work with infrastructure providers and all manners of people that enable the whole chain that makes abuse happen and request for their help to take down that abuse. So I can share my views on how abuse is perpetuated and how infrastructure providers can do more to help take it down faster and quicker.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yulia, how about you?
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. And I'm policy consultant at Internet and Jurisdiction Policy Network. And I'm also a qualified practicing lawyer. So I bring this additional angle, regulatory perspective. And at the Internet Infrastructure, at Internet and Jurisdiction Policy Network at the moment with my colleague Bertrand de la Chapelle, who is in person at the IGF. We work on facilitating the Internet Infrastructure Forum, which is an effort to bridge the silos across the Internet infrastructure. And this effort is facilitated by the Internet and Jurisdiction Policy Network, and together in partnership with the industry associations, ECHO and I2C and Clean DNS, and also supported by the industry, VeriSign, PIR, Google Identity Digital, Cloudflare, and Amazon. And the effort is to improve coordination and anti-abuse efforts among Internet infrastructure operators in their respective roles and capabilities. So I bring this perspective working with the industry on policy matters.
Great. Thanks, Yulia. How about you, Lawrence?
Thank you, Dave, and good day to everyone. So my name's Lawrence Olale Roberts. I happen to be the chief executive of Microboss, which is a mid-sized tech firm operating out of Nigeria. And in my practice, I've had opportunity of not just building out small networks in terms of infrastructure, but have also participated on a global project that interconnected Nigeria to Portugal and up to South Africa. So very much in the infrastructure and tech space. And what I have seen in terms of the local practice gives a good idea of what the challenges are. And definitely, when we start the discussion, we can talk about means of mitigating this. But the interesting perspective will cut across some challenges that funding and accessibility brings about in the local context. Back to you, Dave.
Great. Thanks, Lawrence. And finally, Irina.
Thank you. I'm Irina, and I'm joining you from Moscow, Russia. I'm with the Coordination Center for .ru, which is the manager for country code top-level domain names, which means we are responsible for making this domain, making people to be able to register domain names and to use them. We develop terms and conditions of the domain name registration. We, together with our technical partners, ensure the support of registry database and DNS service. But in addition to domain name registration, we also develop and support various projects aiming to ensure security of our domain namespace, and also social and educational projects in various areas. Back to you.
Okay, super. So we have in the room today folks who represent pretty much the entire internet stack. But one of the things that seems to be kind of difficult among folks in this industry and in this space is actually communication. So one thing to make a positive impact is the need for all the folks who are involved in this stack to trust each other. So DNS providers need to trust hosts need to trust ISPs, hosts need to trust software providers. Why don't we start off with Yulia? If the folks on the panel could just talk a little bit about one step the industry could do to facilitate more trust in the environment.
So Dave, really well spotted. Trust is very important for any work together. For effectiveness, trust is paramount. And when we look at responsible internet practices, for example, it is very important in abuse mitigation that appropriate action or actions are taken by the appropriate actors or actor at the appropriate level of the infrastructure at appropriate time. So in order to ensure effectiveness, and it's not just whack-a-mole where there is an abuse in one place, action is taken and it resurfaces elsewhere, it is important that there is this trust and coordination and concerted action at the right level, at the right time. And for that, many different things are very important, including trust, which is the foundation for that, but also then coordinating, exchanging information, and so on. Exactly that we are trying to do, and we started at the Internet Infrastructure Forum. And the first thing to ensure that everyone across the infrastructure are talking the same language, understand each other, know who is doing what and when and how, is to bring people together. And so far, that's not been a place where those discussions could happen in a safe environment. And that is the effort that we are currently undertaking, to bring the actors that are ready to do more and take action to be able to build that trust, to talk to each other, which then can lead to coordination and more effective and efficient action.
Great. Thanks, Yulia. So, Jacqueline, let's say Vivek is reaching out to you to talk about a brand protection matter. What is necessary to happen for you to trust his discussion with you about a brand protection matter?
Well, first of all, and also thanks, Julia, we know each other from the forum. And so in addition, also in country, but also on a European level, we build codes of conduct. So in order to increase our trust as a business and hosting industry or IaaS industry, we really reach out in addition to our own company policies. That means that people using our services need to adhere and to comply and really to commit to what we expect from a proper user and for a clean internet. Avoiding abuse, avoiding illegal content. All these items are in the fair use policies, you know that. But in addition, on the sector level, we make codes of conduct. So anybody that is doing business with us, selecting us or our sector as being the host and the cloud provider can make themselves known or orientate themselves how we work. Of course, not everybody is a member, and of course, there's always parties that have a different opinion, but the majority, and I really want to emphasize that, the majority of our business is really having a very ethical approach to this, because we all want to have a clean internet without illegal and content and without abuse. And for that matter, again, we are unmanaged hosting, so we don't even have the operating key of the system. We do compute power, and there the story ends. On the other hand, we are having administrative burden, large compliance teams that have to work with regulations. And for example, brand protection. You can think of the USA, as you are here also representative of the USA. Well, coming from Europe, we see that the DMCA is typically having a different approach for taking any action under the notice and takedown compared to what we used to have, like the e-commerce directive or now the Digital Services Act. So it's very difficult for a provider to have a global approach to any notice and takedown. And if we do, of course, we take always the highest. Typically in doing all kinds of compliance policies, you take the strictest approach and you apply that globally. That's the most safe approach. So, and on the other hand, yeah, like I say, it's a lot of administrative burden and cost. We have to have in-country also compliance teams, because we could have a global approach, but brand protection also locally differs because local laws are very different. And so what is deemed illegal by law, and when we can take action and when we can step forward to discuss the matter and after discussing the matter, see how we can take down any content, that has to go, first of all, in checks and balances. Dependent very much on local law. So we look forward very much to sort of global framework because it's criminal law, it's data protection law, it's also copyright law. Everything is at stake. And if we don't do that properly, we are ourselves, we are being challenged. We could have lawsuits or we could have problems in our business. So I think that the discussion is very helpful to reach out what we can do to make this more efficient.
Vivek has a hand.
Thank you, Christian.
Sure.
So Vivek, before your statement, I was going to ask you anyways, what would it take for you to trust Jacqueline?
Having heard Jacqueline, I trust her absolutely right. Right. So that's a great start.
That's not what I wanted to hear.
We act as an intermediary between brand owners, businesses, and infrastructure providers, right? And I completely agree here that every country has different jurisdictions that have to be followed, and that is a cost of doing business in every jurisdiction, right? The trust is built when we, as people who notify hosting providers about complaints or abuse is based on a few things. One, response. If we get an acknowledgement that yes, we have received your complaint and we are working on it, that's the first step. And you will be surprised how many times we do not get that, right? Second is action on the complaint. And when I'm saying action, I'm not talking about, yes, you take down the content. If that complaint is not in laws with what you follow, then please tell us, no, we cannot take action and this is why, right? And the ability to raise or reach out to somebody to understand those rules and regulations that you're following so that we can educate our brand and businesses accordingly, right? And if that is done repeatedly, that helps build trust. And I can tell you from experience that this trust building actually saves money for everybody in the whole chain, because we can educate the brand and businesses on what is possible through this means, and what you're asking is unjustified. Just because somebody has created a website saying your service is not good does not mean that we can take action on it and shut it down, because the process just does not work like that, right? We can make sure that when we file complaints to the hosting providers, we provide all the information in the manner in which they need so that they can evaluate it accurately and take action. So we improve the efficiency of that end. So trust, while it helps the overall industry and the community, it is also a very commercially viable solution to running businesses, especially when you're doing it across geographies. I hope I answered that.
Yeah, very much so. So, Irina, I wanted to pivot to you a little bit because folks who are involved in the DNS and in the domain name world are often pressured to take a lot of action on abuse. Kind of how does the issue of trust resonate with you?
Well, indeed, there are a lot of discussion regarding DNS and domain names and abuse, and what should be done and what should be done, and to which extent domain name registries and registrars are responsible to content, for example, or they should limit their attention only with such types of DNS abuse as phishing or botnet control or malware distribution. The important aspect which had not, regarding trust, which had not been mentioned yet, is actually responsibilities, because registries and registrars mostly do not have expertise within their organization to judge whether this domain name is abusive or not. So we build relationship with so-called trusted notifiers or expert organizations who can identify abuse and inform us. They sometimes also can be called domain name reputation providers. And when having received information that this domain name is maliciously used, we are quite often expected to suspend it. And in most cases, we do. However, what if eventually this domain name turns out to be absolutely legitimate, and the owner of the domain name has lost some money because his web shop or his bank, for example, was not available? And who takes responsibility for this lost money, and how we can split the responsibility between those who notifies and those who can actually take action? These are the recent discussions we had in my country, and I believe that in other countries there are similar discussions. And at the moment, we do not have a clear answer for how we best can solve this issue.
So, thank you. So if I were to summarize what you're saying is there needs to be a level of knowledge within the participants who are in the internet infrastructure and the folks who are addressing abuse about the different aspects that make up the internet infrastructure and where responsibility for the abuse might lie?
Exactly. And not only knowledge, but also practical willingness to solve if there is a wrong request. The willingness to participate in solving this situation.
So you would say that for the infrastructure provider to be proactive in trying to solve the problem themselves. Okay.
Yeah.
So one of the things that has come up is kind of how all these different infrastructure providers work together. From the software side, Benny, how would you address abuse issues?
Sure. So I think the things that keep coming up, there's two primary themes that I'm hearing. The first one is engagement, right? He said just reply and explain why you think something is or is not abuse, why you think we should react or shouldn't react. That engagement, even at the base level, is the first step toward building a connection, which is the next thing that was brought up, right? We need to set connections or build connections between the different providers to make sure that you're a known entity when you walk into a room, right? When it comes to the software side, if there's someone abusing or the software that I am building, or someone that is being abused by my software in some way, you have to have those two things in order to be able to address it at all, to even start a dialogue. So it's my community heart says it is the base of it is building a community like the IGF or something else that allows us to actually engage in a really deep way so we can understand the problems that we're facing, understand, even define abuse, and then move from that into how we react collectively.
So this concept of a known entity, Lawrence, you're from a part of the world where folks might not be known. How does that resonate with you?
Yeah, so it's actually a big challenge here because pretty much while we are all held by the same policies, the same laws, the infrastructure that we have locally also plays a limiting factor. So pretty much lots of the core equipments that we have in our networks here are equipments that have had reached end of life, maybe in a company in the global north, and was replaced with a newer version. And because of the cost of setting up these networks, pretty much a lot of providers here are looking at return on investment. You're not looking to build a network that at the entry point is so expensive to roll out. You have to buy lots of licenses or pay hundreds of thousands for licenses to customize or integrate. You have to train new staff, your engineering staff, to be able to deal, operate, manage, and support those equipment. So to a large extent, we just look at the base OEMs that are available in the market that you have a lot of engineers supporting locally, and you go for that equipment that is still working, but been pulled off a rack. The issues that provide, we are able to build your network, but one, because those equipments no longer no longer receive support from the OEM, you end up with something that not only has reached end of life, but no longer has support. Security becomes an issue because there are backdoors. hackers, bugs that, can creep into the system. And bottom line is that aside from, when you have eventually, maybe you decide to do this just for as a stopper to be able to get into the market and plan that when you have a subscriber base and enough revenue, you will upgrade or migrate to a more modern, intelligent system. But the issue you now face at that point is the handshake. You find out that it's broken and you just have, to build a new system altogether. So so the issues that we face on our divide with this is where there are issues of abuse taking place, it's pretty much difficult to find out where the endpoints are, or rather, it's a lot more work finding out where the bad actor is, what's been done, how it's been done, compared to if you roll out if you go with a modern technology provided by the OEM that has a lot of support, that has quality of service to the end user, to the endpoints, to the last mile, such that you can trace where these issues are coming from. So where we don't get feedback or get any action in terms of bad actor activity, cyber crimes, and all that, it's not because there is no willingness or there's no trust to report such action back, but the hardware and the network topography just makes it difficult because this was technology that you should have been using a century ago.
Right, and I want to come back to this issue of outdated material, but someone I think in the do you have a question? Would you mind going to the mic?
Hello, folks. Thank you for organizing this and for being here. Valentina Guana. I'm from Venezuela, but I live in Spain. I work for an organization called Conexión Segura y Libre, Secure and Free Connection. And we especially work on digital rights and investigating internet censorship, which, of course, aligns a lot with DNS and a lot of topics that we're talking about. Mm-hmm. So since we're talking about CCTLDs, etc., I want and trust. I want to ask something. For example, earlier this year, a few months ago, the CCTLD of Nicaragua deleted 5 DNS records used by independent news media outlets from Nicaragua. This was made without any warning, and now ex-domain owners haven't received any official explanation from the CCTLD of Nicaragua, the .NI, nor the government of Nicaragua itself. And we, members of the civil society organizations, consider this as a form of censorship, of internet censorship. So now the question on trust. How can we trust CCTLD's administrators to not use their power for censorship in the name of abuse regulations? Where do we draw the line between what we and governments consider abuse and what can be considered censorship for the people living in that country or the international community as a whole? Thank you.
Okay. So thanks for your question, and what I'd like to do is ask Irina to maybe answer the question specifically, and then broaden it a little bit to talk about censorship in general among the stack. Would that work for you?
Yeah, I think that's perfect.
Okay,
I
great.
agree with that. Thank you.
Irina, would you talk a little bit about it in the DNS perspective?
Happy to do so. It's really hard to dig deeply in the details of this particular case, because there might be multiple reasons explaining what's happened and you need to investigate it better. I fully agree that responsible behavior from either CCTLD registry or registrar is whether they take action to definitely inform the domain name holder on why the action is taken, and also provide him the mechanism to complain and to restore domain name functionality if it has been the action has been taken by mistake, or if the reason is eliminated, the reason for the action is eliminated. And in our own statistics, so we see around like 1 or 2% of total domain name takedowns when the people reach out back and say, okay, listen, we have solved an issue and we want our domain name being functional again, and they get it. So there definitely should be mechanism both to be informed and both to complain, and this mechanism should be publicly available.
Okay, great, thanks. Now, Anna, could you talk a little bit about censorship? And I have a follow-up question to that as well.
Well, from the governmental perspective, it really depends on which kind of, well, which government are you talking to or of. So it's not easy to respond to that. In our case, or in the European case, I think it will be very difficult to have this kind of censorship. As in Nicaragua, I think that it wouldn't happen so far. You never know the future nowadays. But for the time being, we pay attention a lot on abuse mitigation and so many other things related with DNAs, and not only, of course, with the websites and the social media applications, etc. So, but it's of course a reason of concern. But again, it's governments, they deal totally different according with their kind of nature.
Okay. So does anybody else have any opinion about censorship or the censorship issue? No?
Yeah, so in addition to abuse, of course, it's also the law enforcement, and we have to apply sanctions. Of course, that's also sometimes debatable, but on the other hand, it's pure criminal law. It's a statute. So anything under that, sort of gives our sort of an instruction to us to adhere to that. But yeah, for us also, it's whether it's law enforcement, there is less debate for any action. But if it's like a notice, maybe have a complaint about a certain slogan or something. You know, we live in a very diverse world these days. So any slogan or any complaint could be politically biased. And what to do? What to do then? Do you take action for the notice and take down, or no? So we have, in addition to law enforcement, which is more strict under criminal law, it's in this area, it's for us the question, and I think still, I repeat that, it's burdensome for infrastructure as a service providers to have the monkey on our shoulder, to have to assess this and take decisions, because we are not responsible for content. There's lots of other parties further down in the chain before you end at the cause, really. So then we have two principles. If it's a mistakenly unlawful, which resonates with the Digital Services Act that refers to illegal content. If it's not that qualification, we need to think, is it harmful but not unlawful? And so what is the context? So yeah, for me as a lawyer, that is difficult because on the one hand, you could action the request. On the other hand, if it's not unmistakenly unlawful or simply illegal, it leaves room for interpretation. And what we do as a private business globally is that we also, like I say, we have our acceptable use policies and we take the liberty, because we can do that based on free contracting, we take the liberty to have our own approach. So whatever we deem is not acceptable for our network and for use of our services, just put it in, and that gives me the power to act and to say, sorry, this is not acceptable to us, and we take further steps. So that's how we, and that's of course continuously involvement. It's continuous improvement.
Great. So Vivek, I see that you have a hand up.
Yeah, very quickly. I especially liked what was said at the very end, that if it's not acceptable to you, you take action. And for example, I mean, censorship is not always wrong. Sometimes it is absolutely needed. For example, CSAM. I mean, you talk to any company and they're against it and they proactively take action to bring it down, right? Because it's universally accepted as something which is harmful to everybody around. I mean, governments also are required to sometimes act on and do censorship. I mean, deep fakes are causing havoc. I mean, I know in India, we were recently in a conflict with a neighboring country, and there was so much fake news that the government had to step in and avoid a situation of panic in the country, especially people living in border areas, to safeguard them from news that was not genuine. So censorship is needed. And again, without knowing the detail, it's hard for me to judge whether the actions of a government are right or wrong. But every tool can be used for positive or negative. So I completely empathize with hosting providers. They have to comply with the government regulations. But I think everybody is working with the laws of the country in which they're working in. Thanks.
Okay, great, thanks. Did that give you information that you were looking for? Okay, good. All right, that's good to hear. So one of the things that Jacqueline brought up initially was the concept of a code of conduct. And Anna, I wanted to ask you about that, because there is often tension between a code of conduct or self-regulation and governmental regulation. And in fact, quite a number of the workshops here have talked about the failure of self-regulation. I mean, how does that impact you as someone from the government?
So I have some inputs that I would like to share with you today, and putting in context the governmental behavior in the global cooperation world. And the thing that local governments or at national level, they have their own rules, and then it jeopardizes a more common understanding of the situation at worldwide level. So I think it's interesting to raise here some of the main issues where I think, and I'm used to work and to see as the role of governments, how they can help. Sometimes they don't, but it should be their role. I believe that governments have a pivotal role in driving the global cooperation needed to address the challenges in the internet infrastructure ecosystem, such as fragmented legal frameworks, lack of coordination, and cross-border inconsistencies. So governments must lead to the way in harmonizing regulations and providing clear policies that encourage infrastructure providers to take proactive roles in abuse mitigation and security. I believe that governments can provide essential incentives and policies that support responsible internet practices, going beyond the just domain name system level actions.
we need to address, sorry, I need some water.
We all need water.
So I was saying that governments should go beyond just the domain name system level action. We need to address not only commercial interests, but also the public good, fostering a balance that ensures an ethical and inclusive internet. In doing so, collaboration is key. Trust building among stakeholders is crucial, as it was already said today. And governments are uniquely positioned to facilitate dialogue, bridge gaps in areas like data protection, competition concerns, legal fragmentation. So that's where only through multi-stakeholder collaboration can we effectively address global challenges such as phishing, malware, data security. Another component that is very, very important is inclusivity, which remains a core issue. Governments must advocate for the representation of underserved users, ensuring that internet remains open, accessible, and inclusive. By supporting multilingual domains and prioritizing accessibility for all, we are all creating an internet that reflects global diversity and ensures equitable participation in decision-making processes, which currently tends to be dominated by commercially driven entities. So my key takeaways at the heart of internet government and as a governmental stakeholder are as follows. National governments are essential in driving a unified global approach to address the challenge presented by fragmented internet infrastructure ecosystem. Governments must take an active role in promoting inclusive, ethic, and responsible internet practices through collective action, particularly by fostering multi-stakeholder collaboration, implementing clear regulations and or governance actions, and ensuring always security and inclusivity. So national governments in partnership with international governmental organizations and other stakeholders need to drive efforts toward consistent regulations that foster collaboration and minimize fragmentation, one of the major barriers to internet governance, of course.
Great. Okay, thank you. So, Lawrence, one of the things that Anna brought up is the use of governments to help focus on underserved or underdeveloped areas. Kind of what can governments and the private sector do to address the problems that you brought up about outdated infrastructure, about the expense of purchasing software?
Thank you. So I believe that a collaborative effort between government and some organized private sector promoters can ensure that the required piece types of equipment, or rather set a standard for certain equipments that should be at the core of each network if you were to provide some particular service. Now, we understand that the major barrier for this is the cost. And we have different funds across African countries. Nigeria, for instance, has the Universal Access Fund, USSPF, it's called. But these funds are not, and these are funds that should be deployed to these kinds of interventions. But this isn't so. Rather, they are used for other means, for other political means, so to say. And so we end up leaving private sector to fend for itself. Yes, they are doing it at a commercial level to be able to make some profit at the end of the day. But the fact still remains that to be able to do it right, certain government-backed interventions might be necessary. We have governments that go into bilateral agreements with other countries. They can as well decide to target OEM providers in those countries and float some kind of support wherein they can bring in this equipment identify local partners to onboard and take up these equipments and pay when they become serviceable with some form of government guarantee. So there definitely has to be a lot more handshake between governments and the private sector to ensure that standards, minimum standards that can be set by government can also be met by the local operators. Where this is done, then it reduces to a large extent, it reduces to a large extent issues of abuse, backdoor criminality, and even where it happens, you have the right tools to be able to not only effectively monitor, but identify where the bad actors are, and you can go for them, either bringing down their service or shutting down off whatever it is that they use in perpetrating the crime that they do.
Thanks. So we've talked a lot about commercial and governmental, but Benny, we haven't talked about how the kind of I don't know, what would I classify the open source community as?
It is its own beast.
The redheaded stepchild of the software industry.
I mean, it depends, right? The people who are in open source really feel strongly about the ideals that open source holds and pushes forward. Honestly, every single thing that any of you touch has some amount of open source software involved in it, or it relies on it. There's an application called NTP that we all are absolutely every day relying on, and it is not most commonly known, but it keeps time synced between devices. And you would be surprised how critical that is, but it is not engaged in as often as it should be by any of us. It's not thought of as often as it should be. When we are coming together to try to set up regulations of any kind, or expectations or guidelines or anything like that, there's such a huge audience that needs to be considered, whether or not they know that IGF exists. They need to be considered in the decisions that are made at the government level. Educating government officials on technology as a whole is a huge challenge. And so if you get to the point where which is also a challenge in its own, if you get to a point where a government says, okay, we want to engage in regulations here, making sure that they are educated enough to make intelligent decisions about the regulations is so critical. Because it's not, I mean, we've seen it even recently where open source software isn't understood strongly, and then there's regulation made about it, and it has the potential to shut down applications and open source communities that we all rely on. It's a very difficult position to be in with regard to we want our regulators and our people who are setting up or even advising the people who make regulations to be experts in all of these things, and that's really hard. But you do have to bring in experts to make sure that all of the voices are heard.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So you're talking a little bit about coordination. Yulia, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how that coordination looks to you and the IIF, particularly since Anna was talking about the need for governments to talk to the private sector, to talk to whatever the open source community is.
Exactly. Yeah, very right. Talking and communicating and understanding each other is very important, and was rightly noted before that, of course, there is this tension between self-regulation and regulation, but I think that if the right incentives exist, then self-regulation could be much better because the industry know what they're able to do. So it can be more effective and better focused than the government approach, because as other speakers have already said, governments have to understand what they're regulating, how it functions. So they need to be educated. So it's a longer process and it's not as targeted. So At the IAF, the first step is to bring the industry across the stack, to be able to talk to each other and understand who is able to do what. And then it is easier to also talk or involve different relevant stakeholders and also have this dialogue with regulators and governments, but also to help each other to understand what are the requirements, what are the challenges, and how those can be overcome in different jurisdictions. Because internet is global, as it was rightly noted, but we see increasingly a lot of fragmentation and a lot of regulation that is within the borders of a country, and it's not really compatible.
Okay, yeah. So, Jacqueline, would you talk a little bit about this? It's kind of to wrap this up about this incompatibility. How at LeaseWeb do you deal with incompatible regulations in the different jurisdictions that you work?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, of course, as a company, and typically it was different in the telecom and datacom sector. I think we are, from an internet perspective and technical focus, as entrepreneurs, we were less focused on regulations in the beginning. I mean, we did everything, I think, already starting like 20, 30 years ago. Anti-abuse. So yes, there was like a focus on anti-abuse, and even the founders for LeaseWeb, they were the first to have this private public sector approach, even when before the word was really sort of emerging. And because they just didn't like it, they wanted to combat like CSAM and everything that was just emerging on the internet. So that was then. And now gradually, of course, in addition to private public initiatives and self-regulation, we had that for many, many years. We got regulations, and it's a challenge indeed, because what I'm talking about, typically unmanaged hosting, infrastructure, the lowest compute power type of service we deliver, and for that purpose we are selected. Yeah, it's difficult. It's actually mere conduit. It's the not having the key, it's the building, but without the capacity to regulate what's inside it. Yeah, so that's a challenge, but also an opportunity to keep explaining and clarifying to governments how to do that. And like I was saying, as a private company, you just need to work together. And so we are happy to work with you and also with the forum. And therefore we are also united in the Dutch Cloud Coalition and the community, but also in Brussels with CISPI. I'm the president of CISPI, and we are very active there to be the spokespersons for our sector, to explain about the Digital Services Act or the Data Act, well, now for abuse, typically the Digital Services Act, and the terrorist content online. These are all directives and regulation that want to just clean our networks and address this topic. So we have made videos. We try to do everything that is possible to explain how we effectively explain this, and that regulation meets its purpose really. Because I think the goal is very clear, and we embrace the same goal, but the way towards resolving it is not always that effective. That's true, and creates a problem for us.
Great. Okay. So we're out of time here. I'd like to thank all of my panelists, both here and online, and if you would join me in giving them a round of applause.